What's up, guys? Ron from Rohde Law, and in this video, we're going to talk about the top 3 lawsuits that you might expect to face as a real estate investor. Thanks for tuning in. I'm a little bit casual. I've been out of the office all week for the holidays. In this video, we're going to go through step by step the top 3 lawsuits that a real estate investor can expect, as well as some steps to mitigate and what makes them different in terms of asset protection as well as property liability. All right, so let's just jump into it. Number 1 is evictions. If you own a number of properties for a number of years, you will have an eviction. It's not a question of if, it is solely a question of when. Now, for commercial real estate investors, the eviction procedure is largely governed by the lease. There is very little statutory language, especially in Texas, that indicates what you can or cannot do in an eviction. So, for example, in commercial, we have the ability to lock somebody out. You can literally change the locks, you can put a padlock through the door, and if somebody doesn't pay rent, you can lock them out immediately or upon notice. In residential, however, you can't do that. And so that's just one of the areas that commercial tenancies are a lot better because you can retake possession based on non-payment very quickly and very easily. It really gets their attention when you have a huge padlock across the door and they're going to come to the office and deposit that rent check. So number 1 step is to read the lease, prepare your plan for late payments. I can't stress this enough, but being a good commercial real estate landlord is about being proactive. So whether you have multifamily, you have office, industrial tenants, you need to have a policy and procedure that if this is their first violation or first late payment in 12 months, you probably just let it slide and hope they get back current. If it happens twice in 12 months, then you probably want a different procedure, and it probably depends also on how quickly they paid the first time and how late they are on the second. But the key is not to be reacting to your tenants' late payments or other lease violations. You want to have a clear policy that internally you can share that either with your property manager, you can share that with your partners, but the key is to be proactive in deciding how to do a lockout. You need to reach out to attorneys ahead of time. Contact us. We can give you some referrals. We don't do litigation at all, but I'm happy to help people find good litigation and eviction attorneys wherever your properties are located. In addition to non-payment of rent, you want to understand how the lease speaks to other violations. And what I mean here is it depends on whether other violations have a different cure period. They may be non-material breaches that the landlord is able to cure himself. So, simple example, a lot of leases, commercial leases, industrial, requires the tenant to obtain insurance. So this is like liability insurance or other insured auto policies. But just because the tenant doesn't procure this insurance, if they don't pay the premiums, they don't buy it themselves, that is not a default of the lease because the landlord has the ability to cure. And usually, specifically, it will say that the landlord can go out, reach out to a broker, buy the insurance policy that the tenant should have purchased for himself, and then they pass that charge on to the tenant. So it's kind of a no harm, no foul. There may be some administrative fees. Certainly, you're not getting the cheapest premium, not the premium that the tenant would necessarily choose for themselves. However, that's typically not a violation that can trigger an eviction. So you need to understand these clauses ahead of time. And finally, plan for replacement tenants. You want to always know roughly, maybe not specifically looking for named tenants, but you need to know what the market looks like. How are vacancies trending? Are they trending up? Are they trending down? What is market rent? Who are the people that are looking for similar space? And what are comparable finish outs for product on the market? And again, it's not necessarily something you need to look at every week. You don't need to be like a listing broker or a tenant rep broker who is doing this every single week and day in and day out. But every month, every few months, you need to be looking at listings and say, wow, everything on the market here is fully finished out. They've got LEDs everywhere. The office looks great. The parking surfaces are shiny and new. If we ever had a vacancy, we should budget both the time and the money to place our property to be competitive. And it's these little steps that allow you to have confidence to evict a tenant and kick them out and then backfill with another tenant because you say, no problem. I know what the market is. I know what market rent is, and I'm going to take the steps to backfill the space. So that way the tenant doesn't have any leverage over you as a landlord. Number two, most common, is slip and falls. These are personal injury lawsuits. So what's interesting about a slip and fall now is we've switched categories. In my first example of eviction, you have privity of contract with the party. That's the tenant. You have a lease with them. You have a written lease. A slip and fall is different because this is basically a tort action that you don't have a contract with somebody. And so a lot of people come to me and they say, Ron, I'm very worried about slip and falls. If these people fake a neck injury and they say they're, can't work, what do I do? Because I can't put it in the contract. And that's a great question. So the two ways that you can solve this is through insurance and LLCs. If you're in commercial real estate, you have your property in LLC, so I don't need to belabor this, but you should also consider having your own interests in another LLC. And depending on what the judgment is, that's going to protect you. Insurance is not always perfect, it has a negative expected value for the future, right? You're paying a premium, and that's reducing your net income guaranteed off the bat. However, insurance is a good solution for this type of situation because you have no control over the procedures that they will follow. When they file a lawsuit, they're subject to state court. They're going to be in front of a jury. And for tort law like this, just for a simple negligence action, the damages can be huge, depending on the facts of the case. So the other thing that I will tell you that is within your control is establishing a good written policy on safety and maintenance, because a lot of these slip and fall cases, they really hinge on failure to maintain, failure to repair, and this is the sidewalks, this is the awnings. If you've got snow removal, you've got to have a written policy on how the center or how the industrial building is maintained, and that will protect you against some of the more egregious negligence claims. So the rules and regulations that are often attached as an exhibit in your lease, read them, update them, and make sure that they make sense. So let's get to the final one. This is the last lawsuit that you're most likely to face as a real estate investor, and that's from vendors. That's from the very people that you're willing to pay them money, you're giving them work, they're delivering materials to your job site, and then they sue you. It can be very, very irritating or aggravating. This one is most common. I see this when there's a high level of activity on the job site. And what I mean by that is, are you buying an existing building? Are you doing heavy value add? So this is going to be more than just paint, cosmetics. Maybe you're moving some walls around. Maybe you're adding some doors. If you're doing a high level activity, certainly if you're doing new construction, this is going to be relevant, and this should definitely be on your radar to be proactive against vendor liens. The process to remove a lien, but typically the lien holders have way more rights than property holders, just kind of as a matter of course. So the process to remove it is actually a lawsuit. It's kind of like a mini lawsuit, same way that an eviction is a lawsuit. But the main difference here is you also have privity of contract. And so again, I can't stress enough, but because you have a contract with these people, they're in kind of this third category where they have a lot of state law, they have a lot of constitutional protections. Get agreed upon procedures with your vendors first, and you'll be proactive in this final third category of top lawsuits for real estate investors. If you liked that video, smash the like button, subscribe if you're interested in investing and learning more about legal protection for real estate investors.